Welcome, everybody, to The It Couple. I am your host, Dan St. Germain, with my lovely wife, S.J. St. Germain, S.J. Alaco. She goes by a different name depending on what man she's with. No, we're here with... He has made me laugh more than almost anybody in comedy, I gotta say.
No.
Seriously, up there, I mean, like... And I don't, I've seen a lot of people, but stand-ups aren't as funny off screen, I don't think, because we're just like, oh, here's my problem.
The angry,
and just like, this sucks, this is good. But this guy is the best President Trump from the Trump Show.
All right.
On Comedy Central. He was also on What We Do as a Shadows, very different role and hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the best storytellers in New York City. Comedic storytellers, not just Spalding Gray talking about his mom killing himself.
He went to Emerson,
I know. I got in. I wish I got. I saw on your Wikipedia.
You got into Emerson?
And I went to fucking University of Evansville. I don't know why I went there.
Yeah, but you know why you went there.
I went there because my dad was like a legend there, and like they were doing plays, and I thought I was going to be like a serious playwright. It's where like Rami Malek went to school. Anyway, it's not...
my mom taught at Emerson. That's why I went.
That's why you
went.
That was
such a good
free.
School, though.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
But Emerson's, that's the best pedigree, I think, for stand-ups. I mean, for comics.
Yes,
I
just learned that Bill Burr went there for half a second, apparently.
Yeah, I don't think he graduated.
No, he didn't, but I'm amazed at all the people who went through Emerson. And, Dave Cross.
Bill is the prototypical thing where it's like, you don't really get funnier as a stand-up than Bill Burr, right? I mean, for the most part, he's up. Whether or not he's your favorite or not, he's in that upper echelon. But you talk to him outside, and he's like very quiet.
Yeah, of course.
Well,
he's very Boston. I mean, we talk about someone's quintessential. What's so funny is it's funny to go, he's quintessentially Boston. Mm-hmm. Like, he's also just quintessentially New England. And the energy, the rhythm, and the patter of him, it's funny because... this is no insult to Bill Burr, but like there's a million guys like him you can meet in Massachusetts, work in a mechanic shop or work at a grocery store or whatever. He just was able to cultivate that particular pattern, that energy, and cultivate it. So it's interesting when you realize that about regionally, I think wherever you're from, when you see someone who's a stand-up from that region, you go, oh, they just were able to cultivate this casual thing that's socially done. Right. Usually in the working class area of existence, right? And, coming up.
Well, that's actually why I think Louis is the greatest, because he doesn't do that. He's just kind of like...
No.
It's almost just like, this is a pure vehicle for my comedy.
Yes.
I don't sound like anywhere.
No. Well, no. What's interesting, though, is I was going to say,
New York,
he cultivated... the sort of disgruntled coffee shop fellow, like he, again, I don't think people cultivate these things like, remember the stand-up comedy book from the 90s?
Judy Gold?
Yeah.
In Sarah's movie.
Yeah, she
is. The Comedy Bible. That's
I love it.
Oh, I've never read that.
But that's the book where you fill out like what things are about you, and do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I never read it.
No, this is not Judy Gold's book then.
This is
this is like a workbook. And you're supposed to like
Got it.
It was like there was another artist.
Actually make you fill it out when you're New Face. So
yes.
to Montreal.
Oh God, Montreal. Can I say something about Montreal?
Yeah, go on.
We gotta get to before it becomes a comedy podcast.
This is the very last thing. Montreal, speaking of the Trump. So for years and years, I would audition for Montreal, and I'd never get it. I would never get New Faces.
Yeah.
And so one time I was so pissed.
But but you did the character one, right?
Well, let him finish.
I would do the character one.
Yeah.
And I did this woman named Trudy Sing Song, who had written My Pet Goat, and she had never gotten to read My Pet Goat ever because 9/11 sort of interrupted the big book release. So she reads My Pet Goat, and it's a farm parable that's 9/11. It's like about a goat that like has been exiled out of the farm, and he sends crows into 2 corn silos. And Montreal said, no way, we don't like, it's too out there, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So the next year, I held a New Faces that was not real. I just did a show that was a New Faces where I slowly became Hitler over the course of the show. My name was Greg Hitler, and I was the great-grandson of Adolf Hitler. And I had a member of a guy playing the Montreal person in the front row. Yeah. And I end up, like, caging him away, and, like, because he was, like, he was a Montreal Jew and all this stuff. And so at the end, I'm screaming Juden at this guy in the front row who was my plant. And it starts to clear out, and two of the Montreal reps come down the aisle at the UCB East, screaming at me.
No.
What?
People in the audience still think it's part of the show.
Wait, who was this? Was this a singer?
Jeff
I
Singer
don't
and-
remember people. It was a woman and a man.
Yeah.
And they're like, you wasted our fucking time. How fucking dare you? And I was like, what? And they're like, we're from one. You told us that we thought this was a real New Faces, and we took time out of our schedule. And I went, get your fucking shit together then. It's not my fault that you fucking fell for a fake show, you dumb
Wait a
piece
minute.
of
They're
shit.
the ones who coordinate the shows.
I was screaming. I
they
was
should have.
screaming at them from the stage. And then when James and I ended up doing Trump Bernie at
did it there,
Montreal,
right? Yeah.
and we were headlining the festival,
Oh my God.
and we're Variety's new face, right? I went up and as Trump did 10 minutes about what a piece of shit festival Montreal Just for Laughs was. And I was like, I don't know if you're out there, but I fucking got up here, you pieces of shit. I was like, it was the ultimate vindication.
It wasn't even like you break the accent by the end of it. It's
Nope. No, it was just pure Trump. It was
pure
Trump being like, I auditioned for New Faces.
He would. I mean, he's funnier than most of the people do.
I mean, I was gonna say.
including myself. But today we're talking about one of my favorite horror movies, and obviously your favorite because you brought it here.
Yes.
Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski,
Yes.
based on the book by Ira Levin. It's Levin and Polanski wrote the screenplay, and this movie is a nightmare. That's
Yes.
the whole movie. It's just a
Yes. You know
what?
nightmare of
You know
this
what's,
this woman's nightmare.
It's her. Yeah.
It's
her nightmare.
gaslighting, right? It's a couple of layers. It's gaslighting a woman.
Right.
It's a very interesting portrayal of the paternalism of the 1960s and how she is often a side figure in her own existence.
Yeah.
And then also the paternalism of the Roman Catholic Church. And you have these multiple layers of fathers
Yeah.
that are playing out in it. And Levin he never really ended up taking off as a person who did more screenwriting.
No, he's a guy who, I mean, is known as one of the better horror
Yes.
novelists, but he's not. No,
He never transitioned. And I guess the notion of the book had come from the fact that his mother-in-law was worried that their child would be born on June 6th, 1966.
yeah,
And so this was where the part of the genesis of Rosemary's Baby came from as a novel. But then the movie was released on the day we're recording this.
Whoa.
55 years ago today.
which was
It's
not
amazing.
planned, folks.
Not planned.
Not planned at all.
We did not get our story straight, to quote Montreal people, but it was. Yeah, I mean, it's the whole movie. You know, it's interesting too because we had just watched The Shining, and there are no jump scares. The part that's supposed to be the scariest is a little goofy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
The rape?
when Satan rapes her.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're like
Yes.
it's like a little it's almost like Babes in Toyland, like the devil they use.
Yes.
It's just like it's almost like a Yeti costume,
Yes.
and like it's not. That's the
Or
part
like-
that's not scary at all, and everything else in this movie is
It's like
terrifying.
Halloween adventure level gloves. Well, it's
Right.
interesting now that Possession got re-released on Shudder, and you could watch Possession again with Sam Neill.
I've never seen Possession.
I haven't either.
You've never seen
No, I've
Possession?
never seen Possession.
Watch Possession because what is interesting is the color story of Possession. So in Possession, there's, the primary colors are associated with different characters.
Right.
And the color map of the film is very interesting as the sort of transition of... I was a film theory major.
Well, that's the thing is Sarah and I are not film majors. I was like politics and
I was communication.
I was a
arts.
junior.
Theater.
Yeah.
I was not junior. What do you call it? My minor was political science, and my
major?
major was film theory.
no, jeez, no
Two
wonder.
useless.
No wonder you and me
Yeah.
can't find fucking work. I'm theater and international relations. So me and Anthony, we have a lot to talk about, but no practical skills.
But I mean, I chose this film partly because it's funny you mentioned The Shining, also because you could see. I really believe that in some ways Kubrick does some tribute to Rosemary's Baby in The Shining, including color schemes. the use of greens in The Shining are directly corresponding to the use of green in Rosemary's Baby.
Oh wow!
The kitchen
And the cover is green. The famous
Yeah.
cover.
Yes,
is green.
Yeah.
the kitchen color in the home before they move, before Danny goes, is akin to the kitchen color in the apartment in Rosemary's Baby. So there are tributes, and also think of two films that basically write the story for every other piece of major horror. Any other film that comes out, any film you watch now,
Right.
is
Yeah.
essentially the roadmap is established by Rosemary's Baby and then The Shining as two. I mean, obviously there's, The Omen and
It's very.
Exorcist
Exorcist is
and-
very different, but
Exorcist is very different, but sets the tone for a different genre, right?
Right.
Because devil worship versus possession are very different.
well, it's all
Right?
good
That's
guys
true.
versus one bad guy versus one good guy versus all bad guys.
Yes. Well, and also consider what was going on at the time in the Catholic Church. So you had Kennedy had been assassinated. There was a lot of concern when Kennedy was elected about the power of the Roman Catholicism.
Was John Paul already elected by that point, or was the
No. John Paul's not in because you have the assassination of Pope John. I think is it Pope John? Yeah, who right before, which is supposedly by the secret lodge that was established within the Vatican.
Yeah.
That shifts the whole direction of the Catholic Church. And John Paul II, who is Polish, and the reason that the Poles were they wanted this Polish pope was because of the destabilization
area,
of
yeah.
Eastern Europe and the hope to regain control of Poland into the West, which we were talking prior to the podcast. We're now moving further east into Ukraine. So, but all these things matter in terms of the story.
Get ready, man. There's going to be a Margaritaville in Moscow by the time we're 70.
There will be. But the thing that is interesting is that the Catholicism is at its peak power at this time. That's why you have The Omen, The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby. You have all of these discussions about what the power of Catholicism and also the concerns of the burgeoning waspy Anglo world
Right,
that did
right.
not want the power of the church to usurp their world that we live in now.
The secular
like they
world.
won.
Yeah.
And they won that war. And the interesting thing is between Saperstein and the other figures depicted, there is a bit of a anti-Semitic stripe in there.
I saw that, and Polanski's Jewish, right?
Yes.
Sure.
But Polanski, there is something about how Mia Farrow's parents in this, Rosemary's parents, do not support her marriage with Guy Woodhouse, who's played brilliantly by John Cassavetes.
So great.
Because one of his parents is Jewish.
Yes.
And that's like, and then it starts to get you thinking, it's like, wait, is that why she was picked? Like,
Yes. Well, when
it's a real weird self-hating Jewish tropes.
Well, I think that there's self-hating Jewish tropes, but I also think there's this like, the idea that Guy, right? What a great name, right? The vague name, and Guy, who is like, the thing to me, the horror movie of this movie before it's satanic, is the horror of the mediocre husband. Like I'm watching it, thinking
Who just
about
loses his light throughout the
just
whole movie.
loses
Yes,
his-
it's true,
and,
he does.
and sells himself.
Yeah, it
But
becomes more
more
successful.
successful, but then diminishes who he is as like a person. So
Yes.
like his star rises. But I think that's what happens to everybody that co-signs with
the devil.
the devil. No, truly.
Yes.
It's like, I'm going to give you this, but I need this. I mean, you really are selling your soul. So
But-
he is just he's just an empty shell.
And then
he-
by
by
the end
the
of it,
end.
like when she throws water on him on his face, doesn't even seem that big of a deal because he's nothing at that point.
Yeah.
Yes. He's
No.
nothing. He is truly just a guy.
He's just
right?
a vessel to
He's
like
just
get-
a
yeah.
guy, and in the beginning, but throughout is a contempt, much like Torrance, like Jack Torrance.
Yeah.
There's a contempt that you can see with her even early on. There's a slight dismissal and when they're going through the apartment, right? And then they leave and they're walking. She goes, "Oh, Guy, can we get it?" And he goes, I'll see if I can like get Hutch to get us out of the thing, right? that even in that thing, she is dependent and childlike to him, right? And he's in charge. And then in addition to that, there's the diminishing of her agency, right? And her being like all through him, right? Mm-hmm. Well, he was in Luther and he was in and that sad repetition that happens. Because I think of myself. I think of when someone, my wife or whoever's like, well, he had the President Show and he's on and you go, oh, I'm fucking Guy. Like there's a part of it that's like
I'm
a
Guy.
nightmare.
When I watched this, I was like, oh, this is like, there's some of the things too. It's like, it's that thing too that you'll only know as a wife of a comedian when you even she came home yesterday. I haven't seen her in like 3 days, and I was pissed off about something career-wise. She goes, "How are you?" I'm like, ugh.
Yeah,
depressed. More's not going on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's just.
And I shut down emotionally when that happens. Like I've heard it so many times that I sort of have this.
Too.
Yeah, you just have to I'm like, do you want advice or you just want to vent? And so if he wants to vent,
she gets excited when I talk about my dead mom who died 3 months ago.
Oh yeah, no, that I want to
She's like,
fucking
all right, well, let's dig
deep
into
on.
that because that's like a real thing. Maybe we
actually-
can fix.
Right.
a real
I'm like, I
thing.
have no control over this fucking business.
Not Anthony Antamina getting a hosting job on Wondery over you. I'll be doing
Which,
Anthony's
by the way,
podcast.
he was very
How
happy
hilarious would it
for
be
you.
if I get dinged?
If I were him, I would
Dude.
be furious. I would have privately fumed.
No, I actually was. No, she was there when I got it. I was like, well, it was Anthony.
And we were like, good.
I was like, at least
he
it's
went to
Anthony.
someone you like who's very
I mean, don't get me wrong.
talented
I
and
wasn't thrilled.
I was gonna
It's
say.
not like
I mean,
I
he's
was
never
not like,
thrilled
I'm
about
just glad
anything.
Anthony got it.
Wait,
I was
hold
just
on.
more
But
like,
good shit happens to Dan, and he's still not thrilled. It's always like, oh, well.
I'm
you never
I'm
know.
always confused, and this is probably the worst version, which I said to you before. I did
Me
not
and Anthony
even,
were up for the same thing, by the way, and Anthony got it.
and I didn't even understand what was happening. I'm so out of the loop that I was like, oh, they have this idea and they want me to do it. I had no idea it was important, that people had worked on it. None of it. I just thought, oh. And also when we did they were like, do the pilot, just talk about. So I was like, yeah, okay. So I talked about some thing with somebody about a panic situation. And that was the end of that.
This is why you have to not give a shit anymore when you do things. Because Dan studied stuff. I know we're getting off topic.
No,
we'll
I'm
talk
the
about
same
Rosemary's
as
Baby in a
the-
second.
No, if I know what I'm saying is I had no idea the stakes of it.
But he did, and so that's why he was.
If I know
super-
the stakes,
Yeah, It's
forget
kind of-
it. Are
it's
you
actually
kidding
better
me?
if you guys just show up and be you.
Have you done the
actually
SNL
funny.
audition thing?
Oh, you must have done that so many times.
No,
Just
only one
once?
time. Only
Speaking-
one
this
time.
is like Rosemary's Baby.
You want to talk about Rosemary's Baby?
I went. Did you? Yeah.
Just fucking.
Would
Lauren
you sell
sitting
your
there
soul
as,
to be on SNL?
Not at all.
as Roman
I don't think anyone
Cassavetes,
should.
you know?
No, as Roman Cassavetes. No, I'll tell you why. I will say this: you have your own show, but you get to do what you want. So,
Yeah.
I got to do it. Listen, I could go the rest of my life never having done anything else. I got to do what I wanted. That is rare in this
I
industry.
feel the
very
same
true.
way about all my CMT panel experience. I have more useless TV credits. I've been on 25 different TV shows,
God.
and I don't think any of them. Maybe people recognize 2 of them.
I was on the Blaze for a year.
What
You
is-
were on the Blaze.
What's the Blaze?
was
Blaze
the
was
Republican-
right wing.
What were you doing? What
More
were you
than
doing
Republican. It was like right
there? That's
wing.
like Tommy Loren, right?
It was Tommy Loren and
You were on that?
what's his name? Who's the guy
Glenn
who
Beck.
passed out? Glenn Beck.
He was actually. They just put him in a dunk tank, and it called Jew. The guest would come on and throw something, and then Anthony would get to talk on whether or not he fell in the tank.
No, so it was called the BS of A. And it was a right-wing alternative to The Daily Show. But a lot of UCB folks were writing on it, like in quiet,
Secretly.
right?
Oh.
Well, that's happening on Greg
And-
now. That's happening on Greg.
Yeah, and so
stand-ups.
they said, hey, you could do characters there, and it's in and out. Do it one time. No one ever sees it. Okay, so I did it one time as a favor, and they said, hey, you should come back. I go, how's this? I'll do it, but I want carte blanche, and I will not do anything politically that I'm not into. I said, let me just say that right now. So if you want me to advocate for some position, I'm not going to do
You
that.
don't want me to. Yeah, you're not going to have me sign welfare queens.
Right. I'm not going to do anything fucked up. And they went, sure. So I would do, it was great because I got to do a bunch of characters. The best was one time I played Hitler on there, and I talked about how I was like, I love Glenn Beck because we're so aligned. We're so politically aligned. I was like, this guy's like really taking what I've said and ran with it. And they aired the whole.
Oh my God!
They aired it.
Well,
I'll give them credit.
It's funny. Did he laugh?
Glenn Beck's too liberal for him now.
Glenn Beck's too liberal for them, but also I remember, and listen, there's no love lost with me and Glenn Beck, but I did see him and I couldn't believe you had that Hitler thing, and he's like, hey, he goes, if it's funny, it's funny, and I went, all right, I said, whatever, man.
I actually heard offstate, like I heard Alex Jones is an asshole, like complete asshole.
Glenn's
obviously.
nice.
All right,
But I heard
gonna get
Glenn's
back
kind
to
of
the
nice.
movie, 'cause
All
we
right,
can
I'm
talk
sorry,
about-
baby.
okay.
Why don't you go into it?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So, a couple things about this movie. It was Polanski's American debut as a director.
Yes.
Originally, they wanted Robert Redford to play Guy.
No.
And then he was tied to something else and couldn't. They didn't
That's
want
good because
Mia
they would
Farrow
have
at
added
first.
too much shit.
They would have made it all about him.
Yeah. But yeah, so then they settled on Cassavetes, and this other thing was interesting. So when Roman decided, okay, I want to look at the cast, he drew them. So like that's how we have so many interesting faces, and he gave that to the casting, like a storyboard. You know, you go on commercials and they're like, "This is kind of what we're looking for."
I can't draw for shit.
did.
Like everyone I came in
You
would
would
have like
have,
giant circular heads and
Say
stick
everyone would be
figures.
like a deformed
imagine?
elephantitis head.
They're like, well, yeah, we just got background at a burn ward.
And Nicholson was also, I think he did a screen test for this as well. So it's interesting.
Really?
That he's kind of always been in
You
this
know,
orbit
he
of-
would have been good in this because he wasn't big enough to take over the movie yet.
But
Yes.
he wasn't attractive enough. Like Guy, you kind of believe something's holding him back from being a leading man because he is handsome. What is it? And then you find out.
But you also, Guy, when he's rehearsing in that scene with the crutches,
Yes.
Guy's not a good actor. And that's my other favorite part of it, is that Guy's mediocre at best.
which is why he needs to sell his soul
Right.
or his wife's,
Right.
and uterus at this point to find fame
To be a vessel
to
for
be a
the
vessel.
devil.
Exactly. So so the movie starts out. We're in this building. It is the Dakota. It's the actual Dakota where John Lennon was shot.
In
amongst
fact,
other things.
where the girl jumps, the first girl that they try to make the concubine,
Where she lands is where,
she lands
Lennon
is
was
where,
shot.
where Lennon was shot.
Is that true?
Yes. Oh,
10
the-
years, like 13 years later.
He was
Yes.
shot right outside that entryway. Right
a
there.
little,
Yeah, right near their
Wow.
date
yeah.
show,
Wow. Okay.
That's how I picked my general practitioner. My doctor, is his office was across from the Dakota.
Really?
I wanted to go to a doctor across the street from where John Lennon died.
Didn't help the polio. But did help with my New York City sightseeing.
So the building is somewhat creepy, right?
Stupidest reason again.
Like
That's
getting
why
this-
I did it. Okay, go on.
So so they walk in the building. They're seeing an apartment. It's a big, beautiful building. It's kind of shitty inside.
Yes.
Like it's tattered. Even if you go down
But
the
the
hallway.
rooms are delicious. They're beautiful.
It is
The apartments are
gorgeous.
beautiful.
But what has he done? Theater.
There's rot in the
Like,
floor,
how does he-
and
yeah.
also it's the
It was on
Upper
TV
West
too.
Side
It
in
was on TV.
19.
Television?
It's
Okay.
also 1965. So the Upper
residuals
West
were there?
Side in 1965 was not desirable yet at this point.
Got it.
It
So
wasn't
that makes sense.
desirable
I got a
then?
good
What was desirable? Just Midtown?
Upper East Side.
The Upper
When you
East
think the
Side
Upper
was
East-
where the money was. The Upper West Side was pretty run down, and I mean, my mom lived there in 1956, and the Upper West Side
It was like working class, right?
It was a
Wouldn't
lot
you
of
say?
working class, but it was also heavy Puerto Rican influence. This is where West Side Story comes from. I mean, this is
Wait,
what
this is
West Side Story is all about.
Very different vibe than West Side Story. This movie does.
Oh, this movie's exactly the same as West Side Story.
So we meet them. They're in the apartment. They're okay. We're gonna take it. She wants it. To
They find the
Anthony's point.
dresser that's blocking
the-
the closet.
thank you. Yep.
And then she goes, "Why is why would there be no?"
And she was an old woman that lived there who had slipped into
Yes.
a coma and
who-
eventually
And on a
died.
piece of paper, she says, I can no longer associate myself, and never finished the letter.
Yep.
She was the herbologist for these people. So,
That's right. For the neighbors.
and my cousin's name is Tanis, by the way.
Is it really?
Yes.
Which
such
is
a-
the
Fictitious root.
yes. The
The-
devil's
You
root.
never hear that name anymore.
Tannis?
No.
No.
Tanner
Tanis
you
is
hear in 90 sitcoms.
Yeah.
Tanner 88.
Tanner 88.
So, okay, right. So they tell Hutch, who's her good friend,
Yes.
that they're going to get this apartment.
Hutch would have been in Tanner 88. That I mean,
Yeah,
in that universe, Hutch is in Tanner 88.
And he
yes,
somehow
for sure.
knows about this building. So he's like, oh my God, it's like, there's
Also, for Hutch, you think it's going to be like
cannibalism
a fun guy, and you meet him, he's just like another old guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
Hutch is just, but he's sort of an old. I think nowadays he would have been the gay friend.
Well,
Yes.
that's what I
But he's
thought
just
he was the whole
British.
time. Yeah.
Yes, he
I
would be
don't
Bo
think
and
that-
Yang in the 2023 Rosemary's Baby. And she would be like a surrogate. It wouldn't be as good.
No. So he's warning them of this building. Be
Girl, you
careful.
do not want to live in that building.
That is the worst Bo and Yang. Thank God you do a good Trump, because that may be the opposite of your.
I think Bo and Yang's
that was
career
like
is saved.
that was like Hank Azaria in the Birdcage or something. I don't know what that was.
do. Girl, you
I
don't
think you
want
were
to
just
live
trying not to do an
in
offensive Asian accent, so you
Yeah.
leaned on
Oh,
the
God.
gay.
I wanted to make
Yes.
sure I swallowed everything very, very tight to the throat so that there was no way I could go in any direction other than just vague.
Okay, so they move in, they fix it up, they
Yes.
paint it, it
Yes.
looks pretty now, and because Hutch has, by the way, warned them. He's like,
Yeah.
stay away. It's a weird building, but also you already signed the whatever,
Yes.
the mortgage. You got it.
They
Cool.
did, yeah, yes.
They did,
yeah.
but he was like, it was the Trench sisters, and so you just kind of find out, all right, the building's a little creepy. We're cool.
Yep.
She's down in the laundry room. She meets this woman.
Young Italian.
And
She's got black hair.
she's a grifter. And she says that
Probably
this,
a street I mean, she's probably a
Definitely
sex
a
worker.
whore.
She was a drug addict.
Right.
Yeah, drug
And they-
addict, sex worker.
So they wanted her. So she was taken in by this lovely older couple that we hear about. We don't see yet. And she's got this medallion.
Minnie and Roman Cassavetes.
That's right.
Castavet. Yes. And she has this little necklace. And she's like, oh, it's for protection they gave me. And blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. So great. Rosemary made a friend. Excellent. Next, she's walking home with Guy later, I think
Yes.
like the next day. And they see that the police are surrounding the building. And this woman has jumped.
And there's the dead body.
And there's a dead body.
And this is the first time we meet Roman and Minnie.
And Minnie. Yep. And they, by the way, could not give a shit that this woman jumped. There's no tears. There's not shock.
Well,
They're
there's
just like,
disappointment.
yeah, she
Yeah.
goes, oh, it can't be her. No.
That's
Let me
pretty good.
check her face.
really
Way
good.
better than your Bo and Yang, for sure.
This is my bow and Yang.
So anyway, I'll take over. They're kind of off to the races at this point. The Cassavetes, and jump in anytime, Anthony, if there's something you want to talk
yeah.
about. The Cassavetes, they essentially become, their older friends, which is, even when I first saw it, it's weird because they're so much older than they are.
Yeah.
But they start like...
She's also super pushy, Minnie. Like she
Yes.
pushes her
Yeah.
way into
Well, they're
the
very
apartment and-
typical. I mean, what's interesting is I would say this is like, I think also it's considering the time. I like to try to consider that time.
Mm-hmm.
The pushy older neighbor. I mean, I have a pushy older neighbor right now.
Oh yeah, we have one too.
And right, and
Mm-hmm.
so like you have the pushy older, so they take it to the nth degree, right? The pushy older neighbor, and she comes in and tours it, goes, "Oh, look what you did with the kitchen, so much brighter," and all that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say is also the dream sequences is you have that first time that she hears
feel
them
very
next
Kennedy, the
door.
dream sequences. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and also the nun, the first one where it's her and the nuns.
Yeah.
And then it like pans over and she's in the bed. And I have to say, there's very few movies that I feel do dreams justice.
Yes,
This
this does.
is one.
This does. No, this does.
Altered States is one.
Never seen Altered States.
Oh, with William Hurt, fantastic movie.
that one.
I think Brainstorm.
This whole movie feels like a dream. This whole movie
Yes.
feels like
Yeah.
a nightmare. Like
Yes.
it's just her nightmare, and essentially what happens is
Dreamscape. I mean, not Brainstorm. Dreamscape.
yeah. She starts. She ends up hooking up with her husband. They're having a date night. They
Yep.
have some chocolate mousse, which is of course drug.
Which she brings over, which Minnie
Which
brings
Minnie
over the
brings
mousse.
over, and
And she could taste that it's chalky. And this is one of these instances of a recurring instance of the lack of agency that she has as she goes, it's chalky. And he says, "Oh, it's not chalky.
It's more of that gaslight.
It's,
Yeah, you're
right?
crazy.
And
You're
she
tasting
goes,
it.
and she goes, well, and then she goes, you eat it. And he goes, no. He goes, come on, you have it.
He's being very forceful about this
pudding.
pudding.
And the thing is that to me, he's already in on the deal at this point.
Because they had already,
He's in on the
prior
deal.
to this, they had drinks with them.
Yes.
And remember, she's helping, like, it's weird food and all this stuff. And she's helping her dry the dishes. And when she goes in, you see Guy and Roman. And they're just sort of chatting, and
Well,
then they
they're
get very
talking about
quiet.
his career, which is
but
all
I
you
think
need to
that's
do.
when they also decided. That's the moment I think
that
he
first
decides.
time at the apartment, Roman is cloaked in darkness in the corner of the room, and everybody else in the other side of the room.
Yeah.
And if you notice the positioning of where he is, the bassinet. The bassinet is where he at the end of the film
Yeah.
is
he's
where
right in
he is seated, near where he's seated. At that, you see that interior of the apartment 3 times.
Yeah.
You see it when they come over to visit.
Yep.
You see it at the New Year's Eve party, and then you see it at the end.
the baby, yeah.
At the baby, and you meet the cast of character, like the larger satanic cult.
Yeah.
And this was one of the things that's said in interviews about it, is that the regret that the author had was that he felt he brought Satanism to the mainstream.
Yeah.
He brought this type of esoterica to the mainstream because the strange sort of wicked, or not wicked, deformed stepsister to this movie is The Ninth Gate, also directed by Roman
I have not
Polanski.
seen The Ninth Gate. Is it
Terrible.
It's bad, right? That's what I heard.
Terrible, and it's like
It's Johnny Depp opening a portal to hell or something.
Yes, and there's a hotel that's featured in another Roman Polanski film. Roman Polanski tends to do films that have to do with a man and a younger woman often. Surprise,
Hello.
surprise.
Yeah.
This one, I forget the name
Rosemary's
of it.
isn't that bad though. It's
No, they're believable. What's creepy?
No, but she's still a baby.
She's still a baby. But what's interesting is, like, offline.
Holy shit, Anthony! You can't see this, but Anthony just broke out like nuclear physicist glasses. He looks like he's fucking watching Oppenheimer test the.
That's the biggest explosion I've ever seen.
You never see him put it back down. So, like, all right, just stylistically on the way down.
Well, speaking of which, Woody Allen's future wife is, of course, in this film, and future ex-wife,
and she was
future.
with Frank Sinatra.
But she was a Sinatra at the
she was
time,
19?
and she cut. Yes, she was 19, and she cut her hair. When she cut her hair, Guy's reaction
was his.
is Sinatra's reaction. Sinatra had a fit
Yeah, I imagine.
on the set because he was lingering the whole fucking time.
Well, he hated this, right?
Yeah.
He hated.
They broke up in the
every-
middle of it, I believe.
He hated every bit of it, and you notice Guy's reaction to her hair is, to me, also his decoupling from her happens after that first night, that first dinner. They're no longer together, in my opinion.
Wait, does she get raped with the longer hair or the shorter hair?
Shorter
I thought
She
hair.
gets raped.
I thought she. No, I think she's
No,
got
with
the
the
longer,
longer hair.
She's
Longer?
already pregnant
Oh,
when
geez.
she cuts her
I
hair.
gotta pay attention to the
She
movies
is
you watch.
yes, she gets
She's already
pregnant,
pregnant.
and literally 2 scenes later, you also only see the outside. This is another thing. It's one of the rare films that shows New York in the 60s, like in a street level.
Right.
Not a set.
No, I was there. It was crazy. I mean, they were in front of Avenue Americas. I was just there at Sirius the other day, and I'm like, oh, this is the same place. This is nuts.
There's also like that moment where she's walking through the traffic that apparently Polanski's like, just walk out. Like, it wasn't, there were no stunts. Those cars were real. People were really honking at her. Like, it was, she was put through, I think she was put through her paces.
I have
Fran-
actually a question
Frantic.
for
Okay.
Anthony.
Yes, and the movie is frantic. Just so you know, when you watch The Ninth Gate, there's a hotel that he goes to. That's a famous hotel in Paris. In Frantic, it's where Harrison Ford stays. Harrison
Which
Ford.
I have not seen that movie yet.
So in Harrison
I hear
Ford,
it's really good.
it's interesting because it's another one where it's like his wife, his older wife, goes missing while he's in the shower, and then he meets this beautiful young woman who's like his partner to look for his wife, and like clearly they, fuck.
Yeah.
And then they find the older wife, and she's like, it's fine. You needed to do what you needed to do. So like there's this theme in these Polanski movies of this sort of like
older man
ditches Frantic
ditches
is
the
like
age appropriate.
Frantic
partner.
is the toxic male fantasy. My old crone fucking wife wants to go get fucking dinner, and we're on vacation, and all I want to do is go fucking find young puss. And what if only she could go into the fucking shower and disappear? And then she does, and then you go meet some young Parisian girl and run around Paris. So it's like it's the ultimate toxic male fantasy. All right.
Well, I have a question, Anthony. This is a little bit off topic. If you had to rank who's the craziest on a crazy scale, Roman Polanski, Mia Farrow, Woody Allen, how would you rank that? Because Mia Farrow, because of the Woody Allen, she gets a pass for some crazy shit she's done, man.
Yes. She's, here's what I'll say. I give Mia the pass because I feel like we don't know what a lot of women, and this is what's interesting about the depiction of Roman and Minnie in the show, in the movie, which is that there's also a sort of look at Greatest Generation people, right? And how fucking crazy people of that era were. And I find that when I watch this film, I'm a little older than this. So like, I'm a little younger than this. So like mine was like the mid to late 70s was sort of my first memories. But a lot of things in this film, they're connected because the times aren't that far apart. So like I remember like the tube TV being on, playing the ball game, and just the atmospherics of the movie I deeply connect to. And I'm going to get to this point of Mia Farrow. So part of connecting to that is I don't know if we know what the women that we know as our, people who are in their 80s and 70s now, what would they have been like if they hadn't to go through decades of just not only just personal abuse, but institutional abuse. And not like it's perfect now, but it's way better. I mean, obviously it's way,
she
way
does
better.
get a pass. You're absolutely right.
So I'm saying in terms of like who Mia Farrow is, I don't doubt that Mia Farrow's a nutbag, but I wonder what kind of nutty would she be if she hadn't been with Frank Sinatra, if she hadn't been directed by Polanski at 19, and if she hadn't gotten with Woody Allen. Like, who would she be? She might still be a bad shit because also she comes from bad shit stock, right?
I mean, anybody who's getting into the film business,
I was just going to say, you already have to be kind of unhinged to be. And that
personally, I think Woody Allen. I think Woody Allen is the sickest weirdo of the bunch, and I'll tell you why. One, there's the stepdaughter thing, Mighty Aphrodite. No, but there is the fact that in his movies, he, like a serial killer, like a serial killer just plays out the same thing over and over again. They have a ritual. Yeah. His movies are all about a man who ends up meeting a teenage runaway who brings her into his home, and then she takes on his persona. And only once she becomes him does she understand that she wants to have sex with him. And then after that, he is able to let her go, and she can be with someone her own age. And there's something fucking crazy about that.
There is something crazy about that. I do think it did not help with the Dylan accusations that, but it did not.
I'm sorry, I actually don't believe those. I just want to talk about that part of what I talked about.
But I'm just it's very weird. It's not great. Another question I had for you, Anthony.
Yes.
As a sometimes struggling actor, what role would you give up your wife's uterus for Satan for?
Oh my God.
Captain of the Enterprise.
You
really? What?
I had such an instantaneous. I had such an instant answer.
So to be Captain Kirk, you would give your wife's uterus to the devil,
like Captain Pike. Like
anybody on it.
I would want to.
You got to be a regular though. You can't just be a.
Yeah. In other words, I mean a Star Trek. I want a flagship Star Trek series like Strange New Worlds, where like I'm gonna be the captain of this ship.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the story of the Enterprise G or something, sort of post Next Gen, and I'm gonna be the new captain and like new crew, and it's gonna have like a Discovery run of like 6 seasons.
Wait, hold on.
Like,
What would yours be?
That's what mine would be.
Dan, what would yours be? I feel like it would
I don't
literally
think
just be like
I
a
think
guest star role.
The right
Just
answer when your
like-
wife is sitting next to you is no. There is
No, but we all have that one thing. What would yours be?
I don't know. I don't even fucking have.
Mine
I
would
used
be
to have.
be a casting director on a show that runs for like 27
I
seasons.
wouldn't mind.
Like a CSI. I'll
Yeah.
like give. I also don't have a uterus, so I'm just
You know
like
what? I
take
would-
Well,
whatever's
you have
left.
to give his like cock away
Oh,
or something.
fine. I mean,
I
you
would
could do
love
that
being
for
like
like a film.
I don't.
I just like to work right now. Like,
I would give my
I've
cock
said
away
to
for
him.
that.
I've actually said to him.
I fantasize about not having a cock quite a bit.
He had a guy that was like hitting on him that could have helped him with his career, and I'm like, blow
And he
him,
didn't, by
let
the
him
way.
blow you. Like I don't give a shit. Like we have rent to pay. I didn't marry like
Never
a
read a
scientist
script
or a
either.
lawyer. I married a comedian. Like we are both fucked in this business.
And if you see this guy's type, you're like, oh, he's definitely was hitting on me.
Oh yeah.
Oh, no.
He likes bears.
He
likes a
bears.
bear.
Oh, for sure.
You want to tell you what I would never do for anything is sew my asshole shut
But what?
because I like to duty too much.
You know, I would say yes and no for me because I have such bad hemorrhoids. You know, like
Oh
I don't
God,
know.
no one wants to go in there. Okay.
But you know what? I wouldn't mind being like a cop, like in like one of those Idris Elba and Luther. Like I would be
Yes,
good as like
Wait a
yeah,
minute,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what
a
you would sell my
tormented
uterus
cop.
for?
Well, you just
For a
told
cop
me you would
role?
do it for like a fucking procedural. So don't give me
Yes, but that's like 20 years.
procedural. Just so
I
you
think
can fucking get
Captain
some
of
that-
the Enterprise still wins.
I think so too. I mean,
I
we're
think
all
so, too.
horrible, but yeah,
We're
it
all
still
awful.
wins.
By
Yeah.
the way, also that it's not gonna. I auditioned for who's the guy who ends up being the in Maisel, the talk show host. What's his name?
I don't know. I haven't seen that show ever.
Oh.
Yeah,
My
I have
wife
friends who
watched
I
watch
don't
it.
know.
So I auditioned to be the guy,
Right.
who was the talk show host, and it was supposed to be akin to Jack Parr. So I did a lot of what we were talking about earlier. I did a lot of research on Jack Parr. I sort of looked at his nature, how he was, right? Okay, and it was cool actually. This is sort of when I did a deep dive on your show of shows, where when you dive into
it's Reed
something,
Scott.
yes,
Yeah.
you dive into something and you go, oh, this whole idea that like things age out or change is not true. That like the shit done in your show of shows was not only edgy, but a lot of it was immersive, edgy stuff that they were doing in television studios in the 50s and 60s. Like it's not, Betty White was a YouTuber, but on television in 1950. She was doing 5 hours a day, every day, 5 days a week, producing a show. I don't give me like TV history, but like, I just think it's interesting how we want to tell ourselves this story that it's always different and it's always new, and it's not. We're doing a fucking radio show. Like it's always
not
the
different,
same.
no.
It's all the same all the time.
I'd say yes and no to that. I do think that you need to have like there's a hype man quality you have to have about yourself that was never really
Yes.
needed to have that in the 50s. Like now you're a brand. I don't think that that's gone that way. Like comedians are just
Yes.
they're already underwear salesmen.
Yes.
So it's.
but you had but here's the thing: you had a studio system.
Yeah.
You trade
Right.
things out. So, like, the whole thing was there was an argument against these institutional systems because they were gatekeeping, right?
Right. And now there's no gatekeeper.
And now there's no gatekeeping. You know what happens? Everyone's just fucking passed out on the lawn. And and everyone and only the most psychotic, psychopathic pieces of shit make it into the house. And
Right.
the sad truth is nothing's changed in this industry because we all know the predator fucking reptile that we're like, everyone's like, I love them. Oh my God, I love them. And you're like, they are a psychopath piece of shit.
Yeah.
And like, they should not be anywhere near success.
That was Sarah's first words to my father and my sister one day. No.
What are we talking about?
We gotta get
but this
okay.
is-
Let me speed up. Okay,
Yeah, we're gonna-
I'm gonna do a sped up
this is a
version of this
6 hour
plot.
long.
Okay, so like we're basically off to the races. She's pregnant with the demon's kid.
But wait, can we just talk a little bit about that though? Because I like to think that like some of these people haven't even seen this movie and they want
Yeah.
like a little bit more of a synopsis.
It's mostly about Anthony and Star Trek. This
So
episode.
she has the pudding. She exactly.
Yeah, she has the
Enterprise.
moose.
She has the moose. She gets a little dizzy. He's like, "Oh, you're drunk again." Gaslighting. you drunk. And then he puts her to bed, and she has that fucked up dream, but it's kind of nice. She's on a boat, but then
Second
everybody's
dream.
naked.
Well,
and
okay,
then
one thing we
she
noticed-
feels the devil raping her.
Yes.
From doing this, because we've done a couple so far, is that the biggest overused horror trope in good horror movies is the naked old people.
Oh.
The Shining,
Yes.
Hereditary,
had it.
this.
Yeah.
What's scarier than like an old fat man's balls?
Why-
I
Taking
guess,
care
you
of
know?
Well, the ultimate
Yeah.
nightmare too is seeing your parents naked or your grandparents naked,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I think that I saw my grandmother once run from the shower to the bedroom as I came up, and I was like 5, and I like walked into the kitchen door because we lived in a split unit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just always would go upstairs, and my grandma ran naked, and I saw that gray bush, and I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, why is like her like stomach and pussy like falling off? Like, what is happening? I was like, what the fuck is going on? And it was like, oh, that's what happens when you get old. Like, it looks like your genitals are like
It just-
the twin towers like right before they collapse. Like right as like the part of the building's like starting to come off.
like the-
That's
It's
what old
wobbling.
people's genitals look like. Like a slab of
It's this
stone
weird
coming
thing
off
of,
the
like, where
edge.
your dick doesn't get bigger, but your balls do.
Yes.
So it's like
Well-
it becomes this like grandfather like door knocker. You know, like your whole.
Yes.
right.
You could,
Okay.
So it's a nightmare. So it's a nightmare. And also the dream sequence, I would argue there's nothing pleasant about it because even the way they shoot it, they put a real hard and neutral density filter on so that even though it's bright and sunny out, there's this sense of darkness over it. So even as bright and sunny as it is, and also she's naked, but then she's in the bikini on the boat. And again, you have this gathering, right? Just like the school, you have a gathering. Right. There's a gathering there of people. So the idea that she's in and out of it, I would say it's awful. It's a fugue state less than it's a dream. Okay.
Do we think that when she's being raped, do we think everybody really was there watching her? Because I got
Yes.
the sense that like they all came in, she's been drugged.
That's why
let's
that
watch.
dresser
actually
was in
see
front of the closet. The
You can see a
closet was the
craft service
secret
guy
way.
eating cheese.
Yeah. There's a secret entrance in the door. That's why that dresser was blocking the closet.
So she's pregnant. She goes to Charles Grodin, who I love so
Yes.
much. Who everybody in this movie, you're like, when are they going to like become an evil person? Like that's what I think
And
throughout the
Grodin's
whole
the most
movie.
interesting one because he's not part of the cult, but he just gives them up because
you know
she's
why
a
he
woman
does?
and
Yes.
he's but she's a hysterical woman. So he's like,
Yes.
I'll call up your doctor.
Let me
and-
call this doctor who seems reputable. I mean, he knows the name,
Saperstein,
Saperstein.
Jew.
But then he
Very
goes
Jewish.
in
They really
Yeah,
pulled the
they
Jewish
really-
name
Yes.
besides Dr. Geveltovich Bagel.
Dr. Torah?
Okay.
Doctor, it's cold in here.
So she's pregnant. This is great. Everybody's celebrating. Everybody's gathering around her. They want to take care of her. Don't take those vitamins. We're gonna make you things.
This
we have
organic
all these special
drink thing.
this thing. And then at some point, when does Rosemary start realizing she's being drugged?
Well, it plugs into this idea also of the new agey shit that was happening in the 60s, right? And so this whole idea of the young couple, the young idea, and like the predatory leeching of the greatest generation folks on these young people, right? So this idea is also like there's this thing about generational leeching and bleeding off of, right? So the idea is when she, you know, when she gives her that natural drink, right? There's this idea of like they're this hip bohemian couple, right? And so she gives her the drink. She realizes the drink after Hutch goes into the coma,
Right.
And then she finds out what's going on, and and that was I remember because she says to her Minnie, she goes, Minnie, I'm not gonna have the shake today. I gotta go meet somebody.
Right.
Then she runs into Minnie after she learns, and Minnie goes, oh, I can't believe I'm finding you here on the street. You gotta go, Rosemary. You gotta come back to the apartment.
Right.
So they go back, gives her the drink.
Uh-huh.
That's when she starts to realize that the pain is directly related to the shake. She stops drinking the shake. She starts to look better.
And that's because the friends. Remember, she has a party with their normal friends,
Yes,
and
the
normal
normal
women
friend.
are
Yes,
like,
normal
and he's
women
like, girls, help me carry this out, and they all kind of surround her, and they're like,
Who were also
this-
all beautiful, so I'm sure
So
Roman
hot.
was like,
Roman was-
well, I can't get she's already with someone, so I'll make all the friends.
Yeah, but no one was underage, so he wasn't interested. So she...
They are squarely of age. That's
they
the
are,
one thing I'm like,
unfortunately.
these girls are hot and of age. What's going on
They're
here?
women. They're not girls.
Well, this is pre-Tate. I always wonder what, like, Sharon Tate's murder did. You know, trauma can trigger things that are in people. It can trigger them to then act them out.
Do you think, because people think a lot of stuff that happened with this movie, because people think that like part of that was because of the film, that it was anyone that worked on it, they somehow developed like this haunting
the guy who did the
energy
score,
around
the
them.
guy who did the score died.
know.
He died.
man.
Someone
I bet
went into
you
a
do.
coma.
Come on, guys.
Sharon Tate was murdered. No, but I feel like you could
I
say
feel
that
like
about
if
any
you
movie.
That's what I mean. I feel like if you studied Avatar, you would find a few deaths connected to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, because
Besides,
people committed suicide.
yeah, because
They were like, I can't believe I'm...
Spaventa
Well,
is
actually,
an Avatar
Wizard
apologist.
of Oz is a great
You're
example.
an
of all
Avatar
the good shit.
apologist?
Love it. Saw a Way of Water twice.
Oh,
Ew.
More like way off of water. Am I right, Spaventa? I haven't seen it.
Okay, so
I just think
Hutch-
it's sexy Blue Man Group.
Here's
That's
one
what-
thing you realize is
Yes.
that like Hutch is things start going missing, right? So Guy has this role. That guy fell into a coma. Everybody's getting hurt. Oh no, he went blind. The main actor, that
the
guy
main
was
actor went blind, and then what it is Hutch's glove goes missing.
right. He can't find his other gloves. So
Yes.
it's like little tiny little pieces that you end up seeing play out.
It's sort of
later
a
on.
witchcraft. What's interesting is they say it's a Satanism film, but it's more
But
of
it
a
is
witchcraft
weren't
film.
the Trent sisters witches?
Yes,
Wasn't
so it's a
they-
witchcraft film bringing about the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I really do love about this film is that there's this idea of like, is this real? Is this not real?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a dream? Is it not? And even the only time it gets real, really, is when she sees the baby and it essentially looks like the devil,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
You know, that's
We
when
just
she-
see its eyes, right?
we
Yeah.
just see its eyes. And what I find interesting about all of it is the sort of one of the interesting things that's always depicted in Satanism is the idea of choice, right? That you have to make a choice. You can't be forced into. It's even the vampiric code of like you have to invite them in, right?
Right.
And so even at the very end, Roman implores Rosemary, would you feed him? Please take care of me as your baby, because Minnie can't do it because they're too old, and he goes, it would be unnatural, like very like it's such a
And
crazy
this, by the way, we
line.
skipped in front. The whole rest of the movie is essentially 2 steps forward, her step back, her thinking that 1 step forward, 2 steps back, her thinking, oh, maybe I've got control of this, and then some other thing, whether it's Hutch going into a coma, whether it's Charles Grodin as what's his name in this?
yeah,
Hill
Dr. Hill.
becoming and essentially doing a heel turn and giving them up. It's gotten to the point where she's had the baby, she passed out. They said that she lost the baby. She starts to hear the baby's cries. She ends up going to.
No, they say she has the baby. It's a healthy boy.
No, they said they lose the baby, right?
Oh.
they
Yeah.
lose the
I
baby.
missed that. Oh, and then she hears it cry, and then
She loses the baby, and then she realizes with the Scrabble board that Roman's name is the name of the child, the son of these
the
witches.
son of the witches that Hutch was meeting her to give her that book
Yes.
that day, where he ends up
Yes.
falling into a
And
coma.
it's
Then she
always the
dies.
book. It's always this book
Yep.
that's.
And he has it earmarked and things underlined, and she's like, it's the title of the book, and then she realizes it's the name,
Yep.
and the name turns out to be Roman Cassavetes.
And what you realize is to think about when you watch Rosemary's Baby. If you're listening to this and you haven't, watch that, and then watch something like what's that? The sort of granddaddy of found footage movies.
Blair Witch.
No, not Blair Witch. I'm sorry, the modern one, the one in the house. Watch Paranormal Activity, and realize that almost there's so much mapping of Rosemary's Baby to Paranormal Activity.
Well, the dynamic of like the no agency thing.
The dynamic of no agency, the psychic who almost comes in, but then the abandonment of people who could help,
Yeah.
but either because of circumstances hoisted on them or whatever.
Well, there's the one guy who just bails.
Yep, and that guy
that
bails.
happens in like every horror movie. You and I have talked about this. How like in Misery, the cop comes in and then she kills him.
But
There's always that person you
Rosemary's
think is gonna
Baby
save.
sets the tone for most of this. Like, I was thinking about it, I go, I cannot think of a movie earlier than this that sets this many trope tones well. Like, I'm sure.
I mean, I guess Psycho, you could say, but that's
Psycho was
probably
around the same time, though. Did it come out?
No,
in
Psycho's 1960.
Oh, is that
Psycho
early?
came out beforehand, but it's a different type of movie. This isn't the satanic stuff. This is
No.
just they set up like the slasher and somebody's a bad guy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but you argue Psycho is the slasher. It's sort of the slasher prototype, but I guess it's the psycho killer prototype.
So it's more a psycho
So it's
killer.
like psycho killer prototype. Then you have the sort of mysterious witch magic book set by Rosemary's Baby. You have the possession archetype established by Exorcist,
Yeah.
right, and Omen to
Right.
some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And
But like Psycho is like in a lot of ways, like Texas Chainsaw is almost like an evolved Psycho in some ways.
oh
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean Texas Chainsaw to me, is another brilliant template that has been exploited how many times. I played Leatherface in Austin at South by.
Oh yeah.
I did Leatherface where he had gone through.
You were actually Bo and Yang as well.
I was Bowen Yang as
You can't even do the
Leatherface.
impression.
recorded.
Can't even. I
Yeah.
won't do it. But I had opened a series of spas called Pleasure Face by Leatherface. Because I had learned, I had been to treatment and I had realized that I grew up in a toxic household and suffered abuse.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I thought you were talking about you for a second.
I know. I was like, Anthony.
That's very. So the end of
I was,
the
too.
climax of the movie, she ends up going to the Cassavetes' apartment. All the
She sneaks in through
all the
the
Satanism's
closet.
there. There is a Japanese photographer. So
It's
I mean, that's
so
something
odd.
that is something that Roman definitely borrowed from someone. But
yes, yeah.
He's like-
it's so bizarre.
it's so bizarre.
They're also so mean to her, like the old woman that's
she's
watching
a-
her and
yeah.
is rocking that
Yes.
old woman with the glasses.
doesn't know how to rock.
She's like, you're doing it, too hard. Like you have to
Yeah.
do it gently. And then they're like, it's your baby. You are the mother. And she really does take in Satan as because in the
And
end
they
that
never
is your
did a
kid,
sequel.
right?
She's the mother of Satan.
It's like how these kids that go crazy that like Klebold
Adam
and all of these
Lanza.
kids, Lanza, they still were fucking someone's child. And there has to be that moment where you're like, I know they're a sociopath or insane, but I have to love them because they came from me too.
No. If I had an Adam Lanza, I'd be like, put them in a meat grinder.
Would you?
Absolutely. I'd be like, what a
You
monster.
wouldn't keep buying them guns. You wouldn't
Yeah, I
give
wouldn't
them
be
a
buying
gun.
them
and-
guns and like leaving them for hours at
But
a time.
who's the first victim?
To go to my
she
old
was
work.
the first victim too.
She was,
So, yeah.
exactly. Oh, that's lesson learned, isn't it?
It is
Yeah,
lesson
no
learned
shit.
for all of us
Lesson
women.
just
learned.
read there's a great book on Sandy Hook that just came out about all the aftermath and all the
gonna read
disgusting
that.
shit Alex Jones did.
Yeah.
It's great, but I love this movie. I think one of the most fascinating things about this movie is almost every single movie we're going to talk about, there's a shitty sequel, and there's none of that. They remade it to a mini series with the girl from
With Zoe,
Zoe
from your
Saldana.
favorite Avatar.
from Avatar, Zoe Saldana.
Zoe
They made it.
Saldana.
I guess they made it into a
Son
mini
of,
series.
Also
son
in
of
Center Stage, a
Rosemary,
wonderful
right?
dance
I forget
movie.
what it was. I don't think so. Did they do Son of Rosemary? Is that a movie?
No, there
too?
was another one that they were two, I think.
Did
that
they do
ended
Son
up
of
doing.
Rosemary?
They did.
I know for the Omen they do one where Sam Neill grows up, right? And he's,
Yeah, Omen 2, right?
yeah. He's and then they do I think even an Omen 3, but I didn't know if they did a.
They did an adaptation. Let's
Oh,
see, television film.
He did a sequel,
Look
Son
What
of Rosemary.
Happened.
Look what happened to
Rosemary's
Rosemary's
Baby, which was 1976, and then in 2014 they did the one with Zoe Saldana as Rosemary, and it was a two-part miniseries that aired on Mother's Day.
Ruth Gordon, though, was in it.
Oh, God,
Ruth
I love
Gordon,
Ruth Gordon.
returns as Minnie Cassavet
in
in
the one in
Look
19
What Happened to Rosemary's Baby.
I want to watch that one actually.
So they did do a
The-
sequel. I was totally wrong.
It's a TV movie.
But it wasn't Polanski didn't do it, or did he?
no, he didn't do
No.
it.
No. Adrian must cope with the fact that he's Satan's kid and not living up to his expectations. Temptation.
Who played him?
I love that they're like, we'll call him Adrian.
who's-
It's like, why?
Who's playing? Okay, so Patty Duke is playing.
Oh, now they
Rosemary?
changed. Yeah.
Yes.
Roman is Ray.
Well, I was totally
Milan.
wrong on that. I had no idea. I thought they never made a sequel.
Don't
but-
you love how media used to be where it was like totally normal to just swap somebody out from the lead role? Like there was no.
But they did this
no
on
one
television all the
cared.
time. They would
Television,
just
they did it
recast.
all the time. They would have like a different sister on a
Yep.
television
Or get
show.
rid of a kid, like in
right?
Family Matters
they did
altogether.
Well,
Not
was it
fucking care.
Family Matters? I feel like
Family
one
Matters,
of the
there was a
characters went
daughter.
upstairs and never came back. That
Yes.
was the story.
Yes.
Also, did you guys ever watch Hogan Family?
Yeah,
with
of course.
Sandy Duncan. So it was Valerie's family, and then she
I
had
mean,
like a
you're
huge
telling
fight.
me?
And she
You're
got in a-
telling me it was
I
called
forgot what it's
Valerie Harper. Then it was Valerie. They said that she was too difficult to work
Yes.
with, but the truth of the story was that she was asking for equal pay.
Are
to
you
the
fucking
yes,
kidding me?
she wasn't. She was. I'm sure she was. As a lot of women in the industry were characterized in the 70s, 80s as difficult, it was just that they wanted pay and they wanted to weigh
Right.
in. She was fucking Rhoda.
Yeah, well, everyone thinks it's like
she was
Mariah,
Rhoda.
They
Mariah
they
Carey
killed her
showing
off.
up
Yeah.
9 hours late to a film, which is something she did. A friend of mine worked on. She showed up.
Mariah Carey can
She
do
showed up
anything.
drunk
I'm sorry.
to this Christmas special 10 hours late with Floyd Mayweather, and they were just like, "What are we doing here?" Like,
That's another level of crazy. But I think when you have a sit now in the sitcom, and then Sandy Duncan and her eye,
And her glass eye.
and her glass
Miss Peter
eye,
Pan.
and so she then took over, and then that show
She is the aunt.
took off.
Yep.
She was the
And
aunt.
wasn't Jason Bateman in that? Was the two twin boys? Was it
I
Jason
think
Bateman was the older
Bateman-
brother?
I think Jason Bateman was, and then you had Facts of Life,
Jason
where
Bateman
Cloris
was-
Leachman took over
for
the woman who
Mrs.
played
Garrett.
Mrs. Garrett.
Yeah.
Jason Bateman was so
Yeah.
lucky because none of his teen roles took off.
None of them.
Like, because he was, I know he's lucky. I think because like,
Yeah.
if one of them had taken off,
He would have been known as that.
it could have been, it could have
That's
been
true.
Steve Guttenberg. You know, he could have been like one of those guys. But because none of them did, he was able to move forward. But I love this movie. I think it's probably top 10 horror movies, right,
Oh,
of all
for
time.
sure. I would say top
I'm
5
embarrassed I
for
didn't know
me.
there was a sequel. So that's my.
I
bad
think
news.
it.
But I, think
I
the sequel was
agree.
shit, and that's probably
I
why.
think it's right there with The Shining. I think that some of the great attributes of it are daytime, brightness, light. Those things are terrifying to me when horrifying things are happening and it's daylight out. Also, it has the sort of color palette of horror from that era of like pale yellows, pale greens. So it's partly benefits from the fact that it's set
and
in
no
an era.
gimmicks. And there's
There's
not
no,
one
well,
gimmick.
except for the devil gloves.
Yeah,
Devil
those
Gloves and the Japanese photographer. Those are the only two gimmicks.
Besides that,
Tim,
How hilarious would that be if that was what was in the baby? It was just the open up and it's a
Yeah.
Japanese photographer's just taking a pic. You're like, what did I do? What did I give birth to?
I mean, it's like straight from like the Globetrotters Gilligan's Island specials. Like you're like, what is
so-
this?
Oh, and the craziest thing that we need to talk about with this movie, which has nothing to do with the movie, is that in Mia Farrow's party scene, there is a guy who is in another cult. Have you ever seen Holy Hell?
No.
There's an actual cult leader that's in that scene who then, like, he said in the cult, I was in Rosemary's Baby. That was the one legitimate thing he was in, and it's just a shot of him. And you'll see it. All the other was gay porn. And he told all these guys that he was this big film actor. He brought him on an island. The documentary's called Holy Hell.
Oh.
You have to watch it.
Oh,
Like,
I love
it
cults.
is-
and
it
he
is-
doesn't even have a line. Like he's an extra.
No,
in the
he is an
party scene.
extra
But
in
he's
this.
prominently featured, so I would call him a featured extra.
But the funny thing about this is because he, like, you know, like every cult leader abuses their
Also,
power.
every cult leader was an actor. That's another thing
Yes.
I've realized.
It's-
Or a
it's
musician.
Buddhafield.
or-
It's called Buddhafield. That was
Yes,
that
with
was, and then
Buddhafield.
Jamie Gomez is the
guy.
who's the cult leader.
So he's in the party scene for our listeners. He's in the party scene that Rosemary throws her own party. With
And that's
all
where
the,
Sharon Tate is also in that.
I didn't notice
I
her.
didn't
So
Notice
Sharon
her.
Tate is in the young
Googling.
people's party. She wanted to do the role,
Of course.
but they weren't going to
She
let
would not
her.
have been as good.
Oh, God. No.
No.
God rest her soul.
I
And
mean, it's a beautiful woman, but
yeah, but not couldn't pull it off. I would argue like I feel like a lot of times watching horror for me because I watch everything that comes out, everything and anything. I've watched The Witch in the Window on fucking Shudder. Like I'll watch anything. And
well, you have to come back to the show then. That's
but and it's all because of my wife. I have to say,
that's what we got into it.
I was like I was like only marquee horror, and I actually was very scared of horror movies, so like I wouldn't watch them. And she was the one who like got me fully locked to the degree now where I'm the one who's like, let's watch horror, and she's like, can we just like watch Parisian Agency?
It's horrible to watch.
I love Parisian.
Do you watch a lot of comedy? Because
Macho.
I don't watch as much. I don't watch as much comedy as
I
should.
hate comedy.
I mean, I watched the Tim Robinson show last night. I think
Tim
that guy's
Robinson show
pretty
is so
great.
funny.
I
But
should watch that.
Oh, it's so
no,
good.
it is. I mean, I guess I've never seen. You're
I
much
get
more-
resentful watching good stuff.
Well, that's why a lot of
I've
people
never
I
seen
don't think
sketch
wanna watch.
done this way, which is like his style, which is
so good.
It's really good. But
That's like when you said you had your own show. So he was someone on SNL. Now we're going into the weeds here. But the fact that he's able to be who he is in this show is probably like what you had with the President Show.
You
right?
gotta come
Like you
to
were
some
able
degree,
to.
yeah. I was
kind
able
of-
to do what I wanted to do, knowing that I probably was going to drum myself right
And
out of a TV show.
Well, let me tell you, I've been in a decent amount of rooms, and Anthony is probably the one that I've been in writers that people talk about most glowingly as far as having worked for him.
And,
Oh.
and
As
so
a
do
host.
producers
Lovely.
and directors. I don't know.
That's
I'm
lovely.
just no. I'm
sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it. All I learned was from managing a restaurant. I ran my TV show the way I learned how to manage John's Pizza.
Didn't you end
No
up
joke.
fucking
No,
that
but I
guy's
think it's-
wife and ruining their marriage?
No, that was different. That was Elephant Walk. That was Elephant Walk. That was a
Okay.
totally different place. That was before I went to LA. That was 1996.
So, Anthony, one of the questions that we ask our guests, where do you think this goes, the next scene? Like, what do you think happens after that scene where she's rocking the baby?
Yeah, because that ruins a horror movie. We've realized that ruins
Right.
every horror movie.
It ruins everything.
I think that they probably the next scene is like the door shutting in their apartment, and guys like, well, so it wasn't that bad. I mean, so the kid, he'll take a little getting used to, Rosemary, and Rosemary sort of being like, yeah, I guess so, and then they like have a wine and they put the baby down, and he's like, I need to go look at some more lines. And she goes to read a book and falls asleep.
Does she read the book that Hutch gave her about all this?
She looks at Guy. She looks at Guy and she goes, I don't think we need this anymore. And she throws it out the window.
The book.
She just hucks it out the
Yeah.
window, and it hits a young John Lennon in the head, and he gets killed in 1965.
Oh, that's it. That's a wrap, Anthony. What do you want to promote?
He still dies in front. You cannot bend time. I want to promote my podcast is out. It's called Don't Panic. Maybe it's already over. Maybe they've already canceled it. I don't know. We don't know. Maybe Dan's been a guest. Maybe he hasn't been.
I hope if I get rejected from the host and the guest, I'm going to kill myself. If then the new host doesn't want to, if they shoot down me as a guest, that's it for me in entertainment.
No, that won't happen because I'll insist. And then Coffee with Tony on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Coffee with Tony. That'll be coming back. My Patreon, patreon.com, The Real Tony. And of course, watch What We Do in the Shadows, which came out on July 13th. So you can watch all of them on Hulu.
One of the funniest
Oh,
shows.
that
And
show.
I play the neighbor Sean. So beloved.
Watching it again. All right, thank you,
Thank
dude.
you so
Come
much.
back
Thank you
anytime.
for having
Appreciate it.
me.